What's up, cartoon lovers? Simon here. Welcome to HannaTalk, and today I'm chatting with a Disney legend, a man who has been the voice of one of the most famous Disney characters of all time since 1987, Goofy, as well as Bluto and Horace Horsecollar, but he's also voiced in the world of Looney Tunes as Foghorn Leghorn, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and many others, as well as in the series Astro Boy and many other series from that point onward. Please welcome Goofy himself, Bill Farmer. Bill, how are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show. And Goofy would say that too, right, Goof? Gosh, it's great to be here.
That is fantastic. Hello, Goofy. That's absolutely fantastic. So, on to the first question. How did you get started in acting?
Well, I was one of those kids that always enjoyed movies when I was growing up, and I found I had a propensity for doing, mimicry and impersonations. And in the old days, I'd do a lot of the Western actors like old John Wayne and start acting out things around my friends and Jimmy Stewart and a lot of those actors of the 60s. And I would just practice those, and my friends thought that was so cool. And we'd do things like, we'd drive through places like McDonald's, and they'd say, order in a weird voice when I got old enough to drive. And then we're like, a Whopper with cheese and Arnold the Pig like a Coca-Cola. And they'd look out and everything. So it was just kind of a joke kind of thing for a long time. Got my degree in broadcast journalism. Kicked around in radio for a number of years, added a lot of characters to my repertoire, then got involved in stand-up comedy when I lived in Dallas. Did that for about 5 years before moving to Hollywood, and about 4 months after I got here, my agent said, do you do any of the Disney characters? They were having a big audition to kind of, set in stone each of the main characters. So I said, well, I can kind of do a Mickey Mouse and gosh, oh boy, a little bit. And, but gosh, Goofy was right in the wheelhouse. So out of about 1,200 people that tried out, they liked mine. And after nearly 30 years, they're still using me.
That's absolutely fantastic. And of course, as you mentioned before, you got your start in voice acting with
Yeah.
Disney, and Goofy was your first ever voice role, in fact. Is that right?
It was my first, definitely television animated character. I'd done some commercials and narrating before, but never really any animated characters. So Goofy was my first one.
That's absolutely fantastic. And what has it been like playing such, like one of the most iconic Disney characters of all time?
When I first started, I didn't really realize how big a deal it was. I knew that I loved Goofy, and he was my favorite Disney character since I was a kid, but I had no idea, first of all, if I'd be doing it more than once or twice. And, they don't, it's not written in stone, you are now the voice of Goofy forever. So they don't do it that way. It was kind of like per job, and I figured after about a year that I guess they're going to keep me. Then I started really getting a sense of how big the character is, how loved he is worldwide, and from that time on, I kind of had even more respect for him than I did before.
That's absolutely fantastic, and that's really, really good. And in fact, last time that you were actually in Australia last year for Oz
Yes.
Comic Con, and
Uh-huh.
I saw an interview that you did with Richard Wilkins, who's one of the best
Oh,
known
yes.
entertainment journalists in Australia, if not the world, in fact. What
Yes.
is it like to be able to go to conventions all around the world and such?
Oh, it's so much fun because there we get to meet the fans, and I get to hear so many stories about how maybe a Goofy movie had changed them and their dad's relationship, or how, when they were down, they watched a Goofy cartoon and it brightened them up. And just the love that people have for these characters over all these years means so much to me that it's just it's really heartwarming, and I don't get a sense of that when I'm in the studio because it's just me and a script and a microphone. But when I'm out at the Comic Cons and all of the ones around the world, I get a sense of how much people care for these characters, and I'm just really grateful to be a part of it.
That's really, really good. And when you were in Australia last year, I've
Yeah.
actually heard that you've been to Australia quite a few times, in fact.
Yes, yeah. I've visited Perth and Adelaide a couple of times, and Melbourne, of course, and Sydney, and Brisbane, and New Zealand a couple of times. So, yeah, I love it down there. The fans are great.
That's fantastic.
They're just stand in line for hours to get an autograph, and I'm just thrilled every time I get a chance to come back.
That's really, really good. And hope to see you down, yeah, down in the land down under someday soon as well. And have you ever been asked by any fans at any conventions when you were in Australia, like how Goofy would sound with an Australian accent?
Uh, no, but if I tried, it would probably, I'd say, first of all, Gore's got to get it back down there, so Gore's left my didgeridoo in the billabong, right? Crikey. Probably something like that.
That is fantastic. I definitely think he would say something like that. That is brilliant. And talking about, of course, with the Disney characters, you also played Pluto and Horace Horsecollar. When at
Yes.
some point did you end up getting the roles? And with playing those three characters, Goofy, Pluto, and Horace, did you ever have to do like all three characters at the same time when they were on screen together, or did you have to record them separately?
I generally record them separately, but occasionally I have done Goofy and Pluto just like in one take, like, Gorge, what's going on, Pluto? And just do it like that. But I've been doing Pluto as long as I've been doing Goofy. I think actually the second job I ever did was for a thing called DTV's Monster Hits, and they had me do a few barks of Pluto, and it just kind of stuck. So I've been doing it just as long, Pluto. And in I think it was 90 or 91, we did a short called The Prince and the Pauper. And Horace Horsecollar was one of Mickey's tutors. And he never really had a voice before that. And they came to me just on the set and said, what would this guy sound like? And I said, well, what kind of character is he? They said, well, he's kind of stuck up and snooty. And so I was kind of thinking Jim Backus from Gilligan's Island. Kind of that North Atlantic, kind of Yale and Harvard kind of voice. And then I was thinking, well, he's very dry and droll. And so I kind of thought of Ben Stein from the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And so I kind of put the two together, and it came out like this. And so that was the inception of Horace's voice. And through all the years when they need that character, I've been fortunate to voice him.
That's fantastic. And was there ever like a particular Disney series that you enjoyed working on?
Well, different ones for different reasons. The very first one, which was one called Goof Troop, it was great because we had a fantastic cast, some of the top VO people, Nancy Cartwright, who's Bart Simpson, and Jim Cummings, who does Winnie the Pooh, and played Goofy's next door neighbor Pete, and Rob Paulson, and April Winchell, and Frank Welker, who's like a god in the voiceover industry. And so it was just a fantastic and a fantastic cast. And here I was, the title star in my first series. It was very intimidating, but you always remember the first one best. Some of the ones but every new one is gosh, they each have their own special place in my heart. A Goofy movie definitely would have to be right up there. His first big major motion picture for any of the Fab Five, and our latest one, the Mickey shorts that we do, are taking them characters in a whole new, different directions, and we're getting to get a little wilder and more edgy with the characters than we ever were before, and they're wildly popular on YouTube and on the Disney websites, Disney Channel and stuff. One we just did called, Wonders of the Deep has already had about 35, 40 million views. And it's a very popular series, and I'm real glad we're doing that and kind of breaking the mold a little bit and letting Goofy get even goofier than he's ever been before.
That's absolutely amazing. And you also play the characters in video games as well. How different
Oh
was
yes.
it? How different was it for you to do the characters in video games as opposed to like animation?
Well, it depends on if I do the Disney characters, for example, Goofy and Pluto in the series Kingdom Hearts. That's a little different because it was originally the first incarnation of those characters was in Japan. And so they have voice matches for us in Japan to do things in different languages around the world. And to do the Kingdom Hearts, they came over from Japan to sit in on the sessions. And some of them don't speak any English. So I actually got they were directing me in Pluto once. And so it was like, oh, doishimeka, chao, chima, woof, 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 directing me how to bark. And I get, oh, well, roo, roo, roo. Oh, that's right. You know, it was very odd to hear the characters in a different language and to translate it back into English. It's the only project I've ever done like that. But the typical video game is it's usually very labor intensive because there's so many ways that the player can take the characters that there are thousands of lines that we record. Whereas in a television show, there might be 50, 60 lines in a half-hour cartoon. So it's very labor-intensive to do a video game.
Wow, it definitely sounds like it as well. And of course, with all the characters that you've done in the Disney world, you were named a Disney legend. How did it feel to receive such a level of recognition?
Wow, that's really that just blew my mind. I just got a letter in the mail that says you had been selected to be a Disney legend, and our ceremony was at the D23 convention in Anaheim in front of about 4,500 fans. And I got my award along with Robin Williams and Tony Anselmo, who does the voice of Donald, as well as Betty White and some of her colleagues from the series The Golden Girls. But being on stage with Robin Williams in itself was a highlight of my career. Then getting a statue from Bob Iger and my hands in bronze on the Disney lot, I feel like I finally got the job, you know? I think after about 30 years, I think I'm safe in this job, at least for a while.
That is fantastic. And speaking about, of course, with being a voice actor and everything, and like, what's the process that you have to go through with coming up with like a new voice for a character you're seeing for the first time? And were there ever any roles that you had to do where you just had to use just your normal voice?
Well, a lot of narration, commercial narration and announcing is pretty much my own voice. But most characters that I do, I tend to either get voice matches for existing characters or pretty wild characters, whether they be, like on a video game, I might be a wizard or some kind of an old voice or kind of an elfish voice. And that voice, for example, I got to do on a series that's on now, Disney's The 7Ds in The Seven Dwarves.
And I play Doc, and of course that's a character that I got to come up with my own voice.
And that was just basically looking at the character and figuring out what would this guy sound like. He was little, so I kind of gave him a higher voice, and I thought he was very smart, and he had glasses and kind of a little pocket protector. He's a scientist, so I thought he would articulate very succinctly. And so I just kind of put those little personality traits into it. They seemed to like it, and we just finished up our second season on that series. So sometimes it's kind of fun to come up with your own voice for it because your imagination can just run wild.
That's absolutely amazing. And as you were mentioning about with the 7Ds, which is a show that you're currently, as you said before, you're currently working on, going into its second season, what has it been like doing that series?
Oh, it's been great because, again, like Goof Troop, we have a fantastic a cast. If any of your fans follow voice actors, we have the great Maurice LaMarche and Billy West and even Kelly Osbourne in her very first series,
Wow.
voicing one of the characters. It's been a great thrill working with her on the same series, and it's just a great cast, and it always brings your level up. It always makes you a little bit more professional when you work with that high a caliber of co-talent.
That's absolutely amazing. And you also voiced in the world of in the Looney Tunes world as well, as Foghorn Leghorn, Sylvester the Cat, Yosemite Sam, and many more amazing characters. How did you get to play in the Looney Tunes world, and what has it been like being part of that universe?
Well, that again was just an open audition. They were looking to cast for the movie Space Jam back in 1995 is when it came out. And out of however many people tried out, they liked my Sylvester the Cat. I guess I spit a lot, you know, and he does. Hey, listen, they're monsters, you know. Foghorn Leghorn, the big old chicken. That boy is about as sharp as a bowling ball. He was always my favorite Looney Tunes character. I got to meet the late great Mel Blanc shortly before he passed away when I first came to Hollywood, but I didn't have a dream that I would be able to do some of his characters. So I'm very fortunate that I have over the years.
That's absolutely fantastic. And was there ever, again, just like with the Disney question, was there ever a particular Looney Tunes series that you enjoyed working on?
Looney Tunes is a little different than Disney because I'm not set in stone as those particular voices. I've done it on some video games, Looney Tunes Unleashed, I think, a few times, some video games, and of course, but for the Looney Tune characters, well, like the series Robot Chicken, I did Bugs and Daffy doing that.
Oh, brother, ain't I a stinker?
You know, we're no longer Looney Tunes, we're Lizoony Tizoons. You know, so it kind of different format for those characters, but it was a great thrill on that one to work with Seth Green on Robot Chicken, which I'm a big fan of that series anyway. So that was a specific high point in the Looney Tunes history there.
That's amazing. And as you mentioned about before, with like when you're seeing a new character that you're seeing for the first time, coming up with the voice on your own, with the Disney characters and with the Looney Tunes characters, did you have to go back to the previous voice actors for inspiration in some way before you went off and did your own thing?
You mean when I like took over with Foghorn and Sylvester and stuff?
Yes, with a lot of yes, that's correct.
Yeah, well, of course, you go back to the original. I watched a lot of old Mel Blanc cartoons to kind of get the feel of the character, because it's not just doing the voice. The most important part is doing the personality, really, getting the personality down of the character. It's not voice acting, it's voice acting. The acting is the most important part. And for students that I have and people that want to get into this business, I always recommend acting, and more specifically, like stage acting. I think stand-up was the best training that I ever had, because a crowd will let you, and an audience, a live audience, will let you know real fast if you're funny or not. And you learn how to tell a joke. You learn how to deliver a line to get the most laughs out of it. And unless you get the feedback from an audience, it's very hard to kind of figure out how to say lines correctly. And when you're in the booth with a director, they kind of expect you to know how to deliver a line. So anyone that wants to get into this, acting is the most important, acting lessons are the most important thing to have.
That's really great advice there. And you also voiced in the series Astro Boy. What was it like doing anime compared to Western animation?
Well, that's interesting because generally it was in Japanese first. And it's like watching those old, Godzilla movies and stuff. When you loop from another language, you kind of take on characteristics of that language. Japanese language is very, it's very terse and kind of staccato, and you start picking that up. That's why when they loop those old movies, it is like, oh, Godzilla is attacking the city. It is an odd, it's an odd pacing, and you start picking that up from the original actors. It's a different challenge to also to put English words into the mouth movements that were originally done in another language and make them fit, because sometimes a sentence is longer in Japanese or shorter in Japanese, and you have to put the English words in that space generally. So you have to either speed up or slow down or kind of write it a little differently to make sure that the lip flaps on the character match. It's a kind of an interesting, very specialized technique. It's really harder than it seems.
I'd imagine it must have been. And would you ever consider going into doing more Japanese animation roles?
Oh, I'd love to. Yes, I've done some Miyazaki films, Porco Rosso, and some others. I'd love to do more of him. I love his style, and definitely, I'd love to in the future.
That's fantastic. And as an actor, what would you say has been the most challenging role for you to play?
Um, there's been several over the years, but what comes to mind is, at least with Goofy, was a Goofy movie. The reason is that we had to add more layers to this character than he has ever had before. He had to be like a nurturing father, caring about his son Max getting in trouble. Used to, he would just have to be silly and fun. And so now we had to give him a little bit more depth. And how do you do that without losing the essence of what Goofy is? That was definitely a challenge, is adding new layers to him and still making it sound recognizable as Goofy. That was one that I really remember. There are other ones that are physically challenging. A lot of video games where, let's say, the army guys are fighting the zombies or something, because you always have to do a lot of yelling and screaming. I remember one direction in one video game where they said, okay, now the zombie has ripped your arm off and he's beating you with it. And so I said, okay, and you scream as loud as you can. And if you do that for about an hour, you start sounding like the Godfather.
Wow. And as an actor, over all the roles that you've done across your entire career, what would you say has been the one role that has resonated with you the most and you feel like you could relate to as a person?
As a person, well, it's actually two. Doc on the 7D is really kind of quintessentially me. I'm kind of a science nerd. I love History Channel, Science Channel, documentaries, astronomy, all of that kind of scientific stuff. I've always been very scientific in my, interest when I was growing up. On the other hand, a Goofy movie was very much I related to, because as Goofy in that movie was worried about his son Max, I had a 5-year-old son at the same time who, it was kind of like a buddy-buddy picture with me and him too. He was just getting 5 years old, and I was just learning more about him as a person, and he's just going into kindergarten. So it was kind of a growing picture for me and my son, as well as it is with Goofy and his son Max. And it was a very special time for me and my son.
That's fantastic. That's really, really great. And as you mentioned before, with the 7Ds being one of the current projects you have, without getting into any spoilers for anyone that doesn't know, any other current or upcoming projects?
Oh, yes. I'm actually on about 4 series right now. 2 I can't really talk about until I get the okay from Disney. And a couple of upcoming movies that I have done some looping in, and will be coming out. Well, I guess I can talk about one, The Secret Life of Pets, which is coming out into theaters in the next couple of weeks or so. And I think it's this weekend, actually. And I do some background voices in that. And background voices, I've done a lot of those over the years, and a lot of the Pixar movies, Toy Story and Toy Story 2, Bugs Life, Monsters, Inc., Beauty and the Beast, all of those, the Minions, things like that. So my voice is all over the place. Sometimes you never, but not as maybe a major star, but maybe just as a little voice in the background. But I love the work, and so any of it that comes my way, I'm glad to do.
That's absolutely fantastic. And on to the final question. What do you think Goofy would say if he tasted Vegemite?
Gorge, well, it tastes best on toast with a little butter. I love it. I do like it. I do. My wife doesn't. I like it. And it is. It's really great. You don't need a whole lot of it, but
No.
A little bit goes a long way. But I like it.
That's really, really good. I mean, and that's often the advice that we give to a lot of people that come down to Australia and such, is because they have to taste like the cuisine that comes from Australia and such. And I've been living in Australia my whole life and everything, but I honestly don't like this stuff. I just think it's disgusting, basically.
I actually like it. I also like all my friends that visit from Australia. I always have them that they got to bring me Tim Tams and Twisties. And
Yes.
those two, I'm happy with those.
That's absolutely great, and that's really, really good to hear. Bill Farmer, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor to talk to you.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
That's no problem at all, and hope to see you back in the land down under someday.
I hope you will. I think so, but I don't know when.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you so much. Have a great one.
Thank you. Well, guys, if you'd like to find out more about Bill Farmer, you can check out the links down below in the description. And don't forget to subscribe down below to HannaTalk as well as Simon Hanna Music. And check out my other links down below in the description as well. Thank you guys so much for listening. This is Simon, signing off.